If you're on the help desk and you feel like you're just guessing on every ticket, you probably are. And there's a specific step you're skipping that's causing it. So I want to talk about the most important skill that underpins everything that you do on the help desk and in really any job in IT. Mastering your abilities in this one specific skill set will take you from looking like a noob who's trying really hard but doesn't really know what they're doing, and it's instead going to take you up to looking like a seasoned professional. If you've been in IT for long, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Troubleshooting. Now, hold on. Yep, don't roll your eyes at me yet. Troubleshooting, I know it's not the most glamorous IT topic in the world. However, it very well might be the most important one. So I'm going to walk you through the 6-step troubleshooting process. It's going to take you from looking like a noob to looking like a pro. I'm going to explain what to do in each step. I'm going to explain some of the mistakes that I've made so that you hopefully don't make similar mistakes. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to take 2 specific real-world scenarios that I went through, and I'm going to explain how I walked through the troubleshooting process for each one so that you can then go out and use those as examples as you troubleshoot for yourself. So with that said, let's get into it. So first step in the troubleshooting process is to identify the problem. Now, I should preface all of this with saying that the troubleshooting process, it's a system, okay? It's a system that makes troubleshooting more efficient. Just like anything else, when you have a system, it makes things more efficient. So with troubleshooting, the troubleshooting process system makes things more efficient. And when you follow this through as it's meant to be followed, you're going to become more efficient given time. So first step is to identify the problem. You need to gather as many details as possible so that you actually understand what is going on. Why is the user calling you in the first place? What's their issue? You need to figure out what is not working correctly, okay? Now, you need to understand that users generally, when they put tickets in, they're very broad in how they describe things. They might say something like, the internet isn't working, or my computer won't turn on. Well, you need things a little bit more specific than that. You need to know what specific websites are not working. You need to know, is the computer just not getting power, or is the monitor turning on? You need specifics. And so generally, you're going to need to ask the user questions in order to gather more information that you can actually work with to figure out their problem. When you're asking these questions, though, there's an important consideration. You need to ask questions in a non-condescending manner. I've heard many an IT person, they respond to somebody who says something like, the internet is broken, help me. And you, as an IT person, you might be thinking in your head, what are you talking about? The internet is not broken. I'm using the internet right now. I can access websites. The servers all of the servers worldwide that make up the internet are not all gone down at the same time. You're crazy. But you don't want to actually say that. Instead, you might say something like, okay, when you say that the internet is broken, do you mean that you can't get to a specific website, that you can't get to any websites, that your computer won't even boot up, it won't turn on? What exactly do you mean? And so just probe a little bit and ask what they mean by a specific statement. Because users, they're calling you for a reason. Because you are an expert in computers, or at least you're trying to be, and they are not. Okay? And so they will often use terms that they think they know what they mean, but they really don't. They might say, my hard drive is full, but really it's not. They really mean that their memory is being used and they need more memory. Or they say, like I mentioned, the internet is broken. They don't really mean the whole internet is broken. They mean that they can't access a specific website. Okay? So don't always trust the terms that users use, so always clarify when you're asking these questions. What do you mean by this specific term? Explain that a little bit further. Once you ask some questions, you're going to try your best to be able to duplicate the issue. Is going to serve two purposes. Number one, it's going to make sure that you for sure understand what the user means, what the problem actually is. And number two, it's going to let you test the problem to see whether you actually fixed it down the road. You need to identify the scope. You need to figure out whether it's a problem that is only affecting this particular user or whether it's a larger problem and the whole network is being affected, for example. You need to think about things such as, has anything changed recently? Perhaps the user has moved locations. Maybe they've moved their monitor and a cable has come unplugged. Maybe somebody has moved a cable in the data closet, or perhaps somebody has made a change on the firewall. And so you need to be aware of those changes. Depending on the situation, you might check the log files, whether that be on their computer or on a server. See what exactly is causing their issue. Once you've identified the problem, we can then move on to step 2. Establish a theory of probable cause. So once you actually understand what the problem is, you can start making some educated guesses as to what might be causing the problem, okay? These aren't random guesses. So we're going to make a list of possible causes, starting from most likely and easiest to test, and going all the way down to the least likely and the hardest to test, okay? Some at the top of the list might be, if their computer won't boot up, might be checking their power cable. Is the computer plugged in? Is it getting power? Is the monitor plugged in? Something farther down the list might be, is there a hardware problem inside of the computer? Is the hard drive busted? Is the RAM not working properly? Is there a power short somewhere? And so we're going to start dividing a problem into smaller chunks, okay? And so we're going to start with, like I said, we're going to start with the easiest to test items, work down to the hardest to test items, and then we're going to slowly work through those things, which I'll get to in just a second here. But this is where I need to stress, do not make assumptions, okay? Just because something is small and easy to test does not mean that the user will think to actually check that. So always double check that the power cable is plugged in, that the computer has been restarted, that the monitor is plugged in. Always check these small, easy to test things before you move on to the harder things, because it makes you feel really dumb when you finally realize that the power cable is not plugged in after 15-20 minutes of trying to figure out what's going on because you just assumed that the user checked that before they called you. No. Always double check things, because the user's calling you for a reason. They are not an expert. You are. So as you start making a list of possible causes, I need to stress that as you grow in experience, how you write this list is going to change, okay? As you start to recognize patterns, you are going to start, you're going to start writing items in a different order. You're going to start finding that certain things are more likely to be the problem than others. And this is just purely based on experience and on patterns that you're starting to recognize. This is also where it's helpful to understand the environment that you're working in. Understanding the systems, the computer systems, how the computer works, how technologies work, understanding recent changes that have been made in the organization or at the user's workstation or in physical location, whatever it might be. The more you understand your environment, the easier it's going to be to identify possible problems. Depending on the problem, you might also need to start researching the symptoms that you're seeing. This includes an internal knowledge base, if your organization has one. Google as a top go-to. It could be manufacturers' support forums. If you've got a specific error code, look up those error codes before you go into the user to do some troubleshooting. That's going to save you some time if you know what you're getting yourself into right up front. Step number 3 then, once you've got a list of possible causes, is to start testing your theory. One at a time, you're going to start eliminating possible causes. Let me repeat that. One at a time. You're going to start eliminating possible causes. You don't want to make several changes at once and then test, because once you find the fix, you're not going to know which of those changes actually fixed the problem. And so you're not going to be able to document, like we'll get onto a little bit later. So you're going to start with the easy to test fixes. You're going to start working your way down the list. And as I mentioned, as you grow in experience, the way that you move around this list is going to change. You might start in the middle. Let's say somebody's computer won't boot up again. It's a common problem. And so initially, when you're brand new, you might start at the power, and then you work your way to the monitor and check the connections and check the power button on the monitor and check the input source on the monitor, and then you move to some of the computer settings itself, to the BIOS settings, and etc., etc. Whereas once you gain a little bit of experience, you might think, okay, I know that the most common cause I've seen with this is that the monitor itself is not turned on. And so you start with that, and then you check that the monitor is actually plugged into the computer, and then you move to check that the computer itself has power, and then you move to the BIOS. And so you're moving in a slightly different order based on your experience, which things are more common than others. Now, if you get to the bottom of your list, you've tested all of your potential ideas, and you still haven't found the issue, now is a good time to escalate the ticket, to seek expert guidance, or depending on the situation, to do some more research yourself. Okay, this is going to depend on, number one, how much you want to learn. Number two, your company's guidelines. They should provide you some information on as to when you should escalate. But this is a prime example of you should escalate when you have tried solving the ticket yourself, you've come to your wit's end, and now you're going to bump it up the chain to somebody who knows more than you. And so now we come to step number 4. Establish a plan of action. Now, this step is oftentimes merged with step number 3. And so really, step number 4 only applies in situations where you have a more complex problem that's going to take an extended period of time in order to fix or implement a change to potentially fix the problem. So once you find the cause of the issue, let's say that a user's hard drive has gone bad, and so they need a new hard drive. We need to build a plan that's going to correct the issue with minimum impact. Okay, notice that I said with minimum impact. You can make several different plans, but there's going to be one of them that's going to be the best plan that is going to impact the user the least and get them back up and working in the quickest possible manner. And so you need to plan, number 1, how you're going to actually make the change, how long it's going to take. And number 2, you need to have a backup plan in case your plan goes wrong. Okay, in case something goes awry, in case something goes unexpected. So you need to identify potential effects that this change might have, and you need to create some backup plans to account for this in case those go wrong. You need to be able to revert to how the system currently is if your change goes awry. And so this next point I need to stress. This will save you so much heartache. This will save you so much stress, so much time if you just follow this one tip. Always, always, always back up. Make sure that there's a way to go back to the way things were before you made the change, just in case it doesn't work, in case something goes wrong. It might be a file-based backup, where you copy a single file, you rename it, and then when you start making modifications to this file over here, well, now in case something goes wrong, you've still got this original file that you made the copy of. You can go just delete this one over here, and you've still got this one. It's still good to go. The user's still got all the data. You might need to make an application backup, where you back up the database for a particular application to save all of the data before you start making changes. It might be an image backup, and you make a backup of all of the computer before you start making changes. You might make a backup to a switch config or to some particular network equipment. If you're going to roll something back, you need to have a plan. You need to have tested it, okay? So you need to know that that backup is going to work. It's really awkward if you back something up and then you make the change and it screws up and you go to make the backup and you realize that the backup doesn't work. That's going to be really bad for you. Don't be that person. Step number 5 is to verify full system functionality. So once the change has been made, you think you have the issue fixed, you need to double check to make sure that you actually have, in fact, fixed the issue. So have the user test it, because this is going to satisfy them that the issue is fixed, as well as satisfy you that the issue is fixed. Once the user has confirmed that their ticket has been fixed, then you need to test beyond the original system to ensure that other problems have not cropped up, depending on the fix that you've made. If you've made an alteration to the firewall, you might need to check with other users to make sure that no change has been made there, nothing that impacts their access. And then, depending on the situation, you might need to implement preventative measures to keep that same problem from happening again. You do not want that same problem to happen again come a week. The user calls you again with the same exact problem. That's going to make you look bad. So implement measures to make sure that it doesn't crop up again. And finally, step number 6, we come to the last step in the lineup. Document your findings. If you don't document things, chances are very great that you're going to forget what exactly it was that you changed to fix something the next time it crops up. Because chances are great that it will crop up again for another user in a couple months, in a year's time. Something similar to this is going to crop up. You're going to see this again. And if you don't document it, you're going to have to try to remember in vain what it was that you had done. And you just wished that you had documented your process, but you didn't, and now you have to go through the exact same thing all over again, finding what the problem is. Or your coworkers, if you don't see the problem again, your coworkers will have to struggle through the same thing you did, because they won't know that you solved this problem, more than likely, and so they're going to go through the exact same process you did, versus if you document things, you're going to save not only yourself time, but you're going to save your coworkers time. So you need to document what was the problem, what action or actions did you take, and what outcome did it have? How did it fix the problem? It's going to save yourself time in the long run and make everybody's life easier. So there we have the 6-step troubleshooting process. Now, I need to stop here and just comment that I said that the troubleshooting process is a system. It makes things more efficient. In a similar way, having a help desk system makes things more efficient. So if you feel like every time you get a help desk call, you feel like you don't know what to say, you don't know how to talk to users, you don't need to know more. The problem is that it is not that you're dumb, you just need a process. You need a system. And so if you want that system, I have actually created a free step-by-step help desk guide. It's called 5 Steps to Confidence on Help Desk Calls. And so if you want this free guide, go to my website. I'll put a link down in the description below to get that free guide. Now, as I promised, we are going to take 2 real-life scenarios that I have encountered myself and that I have troubleshooted, and I'm going to show you how I walked through the troubleshooting process for both of these scenarios. So scenario number 1, a user gets a hold of me, and they tell me that their computer is running incredibly slow. And so first thing I do, I go up to their computer because they were relatively close by, and so I just walk over there and I start using their computer for myself, and it was in fact running incredibly slow, just as they said. It wasn't just one application, it wasn't the internet, it was their entire computer. Every time you clicked on something, it took seconds before it responded. It was terrible. And so I started by running the SFC command. I ran the DISM command to see perhaps their operating system had some corruption in it. Their file system might have had some corruption in it. I was thinking. Next that I had was there might be some background services running. OneDrive that's just taking up all of their memory. And so I looked through that, didn't see anything. I inspected their RAM usage, didn't see anything major there. So I went through several different theories. I tested out those theories to no avail. They didn't solve anything. And then as I kept looking around, I realized that I was seeing spikes in the task manager in their disk usage. It was spiking up to 100%, which is insane when the computer was just sitting there idling. I wasn't doing anything, but as soon as I clicked on File Explorer to open it, disk usage spiked to 100%. And then I thought, there's got to be a problem with the hard drive on here. Now, this particular system, it had an HDD as well as an Optane drive. And so I ran a couple hard disk scans on the HDD, and there didn't seem to be any problems with it. And so I suspected that the Optane drive was starting to go bad and that its acceleration was not working anymore, and thus the user was just left with original HDD speeds, aka incredibly slow. And so we made a plan to install an SSD in its place. We're going to take all of the data that's on the HDD and we're going to transfer it to the SSD drive, and we're just going to completely get rid of the Optane drive that was in their computer. And so we made that plan, had to order in the SSD. A week or two later, it came in, and I went in and I told them, hey, your computer, it's probably going to be down for the majority of the day. It's going to take a couple hours for me to back it up and then to actually get this thing installed. And so very first thing I did is to make a backup. I made a complete image backup of their drive so that in case something went wrong, well, I've still got this backup. I could have just plugged it in, restored it, and they would have had their original system back up and running again. But thankfully, that didn't happen, but I had a backup just in case. And so I went in, I backed up their system, all of their files, and then I took out their Optane drive, I put in the SSD, I transferred all of the data to that SSD from the backup, and voila, things were working good as new. Speeds were much better, let me say, and then they just had that HDD as an extra data drive, should they ever need it. Scenario number 2. The user calls me up and they say, my printer won't print. Now, my initial thought is that, well, their printer was probably just not plugged in or something, or it's not turned on. And so first thing I do, before I even talk to the user, I hop onto a print server, and I see that this printer is showing as offline on the print server. So I assume that, well, the printer's probably been unplugged from the network or something. And so the printer looks like it's on, but it's not actually connected to the network, and thus they can't actually print to it. But just to double check, I go to ping the printer, and I could ping it. And then I put in the IP address in my browser, see if I could get to the EWS, to the embedded web server, and I can. And I get confused. I think, well, wait a minute. If the printer's showing as offline, and yet I can still ping the printer, well, that doesn't make very much sense. And at this point, I could have escalated the ticket to somebody who had more printer knowledge than me. But I decided that I wanted to stick it out. I wanted to figure out what the issue was. I wanted to spend more time with this problem, with this ticket. And so I started digging around in the printer's network settings, and eventually I figured out that the SNMP settings were misconfigured. And so I put in the correct SNMP settings, and then all of a sudden, boop, the The printer comes online, it starts printing out all of these documents in the queue, which in hindsight, I probably should have canceled those documents before I made what I thought would be the fix, but hindsight is 2020, right? But moral of the story, the printer worked. Okay. And then I went in and I documented it and made sure that I remembered SNMP settings will cause the printer to show offline if they're misconfigured. And so that was that. I hope that these two scenarios have helped you show how practical this troubleshooting process actually is in real life. So now go out and solve some tickets. Bye.